Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Frank Shovlin. I'm Professor of Irish Literature and English at the University's Institute of Irish Studies, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this special event as part of Liverpool Literary Festival's 10th anniversary, and this is our final event of this year. Since the inaugural festival in 2016, the Liverpool Literary Festival has become a much-loved highlight in the university's calendar, bringing together best-selling authors, sharp minds, and passionate readers for a weekend of inspiring conversation, readings, and a shared love of literature. Over the past decade, we've welcomed thousands of guests and some of the great writers and thinkers of our time. As we celebrate this milestone year, we're thrilled to continue our tradition of welcoming internationally renowned writers to the city and to our campus. A quick note before we begin. After the session, please allow our speaker to leave the hall first so that they can make their way to the Waterstones bookstall downstairs, and there you'll have the opportunity to purchase their book and have them signed. We'll leave time at the end of the reading and discussion for audience questions. Please wait for microphones to reach you so everyone can hear clearly. So this evening, I'm delighted to be introducing Anna Fitzgerald. Anna is the winner of this year's John McGahern Prize for debut book of Irish fiction. We at the Institute of Irish Studies inaugurated this prize in 2019 to promote new Irish fiction and to honour the memory of John McGahern, one of Ireland's greatest fiction writers, frequently named as the country's most accomplished novelist since Joyce and Beckett. Previous winners of this prize have been Adrian Duncan, Hilary Fannin, Louise Kennedy, Angela Flannery, and Michael McGee. It's quite the list of people who wrote brilliant books, prize-winning books that have gone on to great things since. And I'm delighted to have Anna join that list this evening. After a rigorous shortlisting process, Anna was chosen this year's winner by the former Chancellor of the University and one of Ireland's most celebrated writers, Colm Tóibín. Of her debut novel, from which she will shortly read, Tóibín commented, "Anna Fitzgerald's Girl in the Making is written in the pitch-perfect voice of a girl who was a born noticer. This is suburban Dublin in the 1970s and 1980s, captured in careful, accurate detail. The family in focus here may seem comfortable, may appear ordinary. Indeed, some of the tensions are registered by Jean, the narrator, with calmness and plainness so that they seem ordinary too. But then, with extraordinary skill, Anna Fitzgerald reveals what is really happening in this house and to the delicate consciousness at the heart of the story. This is a novel of concealment and shocking revelation. In working so closely with intimate emotions and domestic traumas, Fitzgerald has managed to create an unforgettable heroine and a dark picture of the world around her." This evening's event will take the form of a conversation with Anna about her work, interspersed with 5 short readings from the novel to give you a sense of the various moments, the change in narrative style as the novel progresses, as Jean, this girl, grows up and tells her story. So I think we will begin with the first of those readings now.
Thank you very much, Frank, for that lovely introduction, and I'm very, very honoured to be the recipient of the John McGahern Prize this year. It's a very meaningful prize to me. This is from the first chapter. It's the opening of the book, and the character Jean is 3 years old, and it's 1966. "I can stand under the giant yellow tree at the bottom of my garden, where I am not allowed to go. No, he says, no. And then I am in the golden honey pot. I can stay quiet there. I can look up at all of the golden honey floating down on me, and I can see a little piece of blue sky, and I can look for balloons there in the piece of blue sky that is high up from the honey. Come and play with me, Winnie the Pooh, because I am in the honey pot too, and I want to play with someone. But Tom shouts, there she is, there she is. But I want to stay here and wait for Pooh Bear. I will stay here until someone comes to play with me. Then he says, come here, come here. Why? Because I say so. My shoulders go bump at the lion's voice. Hide in the honey tree, Pooh, the lion is coming. And the next short chapter is when Jean is 5, and it's 1968, and the chapter is called I Want to Hold Your Hand. So I had to read that because this is Liverpool. The birthday candles were so bright. Mama whispered that she always wanted a girl, and that she was so happy that I was born. I thought, it is good that she wanted me. Everyone should be wanted by somebody. Then I blew out the candles. We went to the zoo after that, but Auntie Ida couldn't come. There is no room in the car, he said. I will stay here and wash up, said Auntie Ida. It was hard to cross the big road in the park. Mama pushed our new baby twins in the pushchair, and Sissy stood on the brake bar. He held Tom's hand. The cars whirred past really fast. It was very loud. I was worried because there would be wild animals in the zoo. They could escape and eat me and Sissy and Tom and Mama and the twins. Mama kept looking right and looking left, looking right and looking left. We waited for ages. Hold Jean's hand, Edmund, said Mama. I held my hand up, and he closed up my wrist with his tight fingers. At last we crossed. He dropped my wrist as soon as my shoe was on the grass verge. Run on, he said. Go on, run on.
Thanks, Anna. I know that you've been writing for a very long time, writing fiction for a long time, but that it was only in recent years that you decided to try to publish your work. So I wonder if you could tell us when you first started to consciously write fiction and why.
I think I always kind of liked writing stories. You know, when you're 7, you learn to write, and I think that's when I started writing stories. And if I ran out of books or stories, then I'd write one for myself. And you know, I read the usual stuff that children of my generation read. You know, Blyton, all of those kind of books. And I don't know. I just wanted to write. I just liked writing. I liked the feel of the pencil in my hand. I just always liked writing, and I kind of kept writing all the time. I think really I didn't stop writing. It was a great source of comfort to me, and a great way of getting a grip on the world in my own way and explaining life and escaping life, you know, too. I think that was the most important part. So yeah, I just had that instinct to write, which I still have, and yeah.
What was the moment that you then decided to try to publish? Why make your private thoughts public?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I do ask myself that from time to time and say, why did I do this? In fact, when the book came out, it was I came down one morning a few days after the book came out, and it was sitting on the kitchen table, and I looked at it and I felt such distance from it. And it looked to me like an object sitting on the table. It could have been a box of Kellogg's cornflakes. You know, I felt this awful feeling of maybe letting it go or something like that, almost like a grief, but almost raging with myself for having published it. It was a very strange experience. I remember thinking, why did I do that? I couldn't understand why I'd done it, you know. But when I trace back why I did it, I think one of the reasons was because I guess most of the time when I write, I'm kind of trying to explain myself to myself. But when I wrote Girl in the Making, I think I was trying to explain myself to my daughters, you know, as, you know, older teenagers at that stage who were very kind of liberal and liberated in their outlook on life, and energetic and very strong. I would say much stronger than I was at that age. And so I wondered what they were thinking of me, and I thought, are they thinking I'm a bit frail? Are they thinking I'm a little bit nervous in the world? And then I decided to try and say, well, look, I grew up in a different time. I have a different I have a different baggage, I have a different life experience, and so I'm, to be forgiven when I'm not as, kind of as free in my thinking as you are, as confident in myself as you are. And so I started to write the story almost as though I was telling the story to my daughters, kind of, and as fiction, of course, it's not memoir. And so I set about trying to explain to them, and it brought back an awful lot of memories of childhood, which I thought, if someone had asked me before I wrote this book, what do you remember about childhood? I would say nothing. I don't remember anything about childhood. Literally, I would have said nothing. And I used to sometimes think, is there something wrong with me? I don't remember anything about being a child. And then I realized that there was nothing about being a child that I had forgotten. And I think that's probably the case for everybody when you really get down to it. And then when I showed it I gave it to my eldest daughter for her 21st birthday. And when I showed it to her, she was very excited by it, and she wanted to show it to people. And so I allowed her to show it to a few people. She's a writer herself, so I allowed her to show it to a few people. And then they started making moves on it, and it ended up going to Penguin in Dublin, to Sandy Cove. But yeah, it was, it is a good question, like why publish the stuff at all? And I have written a lot, and I have a novel finished now that is with an agent. I have an agent now, and I sometimes I don't know why, but when I see people's reaction to it, I'm very moved by that. And I always thought that this would, when I'd finished this, I thought, girls and women will read this book, men will never read this book. They wouldn't get it, they wouldn't understand it, they wouldn't have an interest. They'd put it down as soon as they put it up. But I've been very surprised by that, actually, because a lot of the very strong reactions to the book have come from men, and I think that's a good thing, because I think growing up a girl is very different to growing up a boy. I think growing up a girl in the kind of the 70s was a certain kind of experience. You kind of hoped that experience needed to be explained because it's so different to growing up a girl now. But I'm no longer persuaded that it is so different now. I think we've sort of slid backwards, and I think that I think there's a huge amount of misogyny on the rise in society, and I think misogyny is about girls, not just women, but it's about girls and it's about children, So in a way, I kind of thought, well, I'm glad I wrote it in that way, because this is what it was like to be a girl then, always that kind of vulnerability, and I don't know, sadly, if it's very different now.
Given that estrangement that you talk about, the book as a kind of cornflakes box, what have I done? What is this colourful thing on the table in the kitchen? Do you feel estranged with me sitting here in a lecture theatre in Liverpool all of a sudden, describing yourself as a writer? Does that feel strange to be talked of as a writer?
Well, I don't feel estranged talking about the book, because it exists and it's there and I know it and I wrote it, so that doesn't feel strange. And I do like talking to people who read books. That's a very different experience to dealing with, say, publishers or media or anything like that. Talking to people who actually read the books is very, very rewarding, really rewarding. I spoke at West Cork Literary Festival this July, and it was an extraordinary experience, because there were people in the audience in their 80s who had read the book, and there was a woman who came up to me and described her childhood. She said, this happened to me, and she was really upset, and we embraced, and it was a moment when I thought, I'm glad I wrote that book, really glad I wrote that book, and I am glad that I wrote it now. But, the thing that I love about writing is writing, and I think being published is a different kind of experience, but I'm delighted now. Do I think of myself as a writer? Not really, not a professional writer. Maybe if a few more books are published, I might, but I'm happy just to think of myself as writing down a few stories. I don't really think of myself as a professional writer who's doing it for a living, or I don't have an idea of myself as a writer. I just have a kind of a desperate need to write and to put different realities on the page, even if it's only for myself in the end.
I think as readers, we feel that when if a writer has that compulsion or need to write, that gives the writing great power, I think. And I'm very glad you did publish this book. I remember the effect it had on me when I read it first in January, and I hadn't heard about it. And, you know, I'm a lecturer, I work in literature, so I usually hear about these things. And I hadn't heard about this book. And I scribbled some notes about it. And I was looking at those notes this morning, and I just wrote at the end, "This will take some beating." Because this is really something else. This is really a remarkable book. Why haven't I heard of Anna Fitzgerald? Now, you're a debut novelist, so, you know, why should I have heard of you? But still, there were other novels that were entered and short story collections entered that I'd heard stuff about on the grapevine. So I think I think the reaction you described, the lady at the festival in West Cork, that's reason alone, reason enough to publish a book like this. I wondered about your own reading of fiction then. Were you always a big reader of fiction, and are there particular writers that you feel that have influenced you in your way of thinking about writing?
Yeah, I've always been a big reader of fiction, yeah, and I still am. I think reading books was the most enriching thing in my childhood, and I love poetry. I've always loved poetry. I still read a lot of poetry. The writers who kind of influenced me, I always find that really difficult to say, because I think a lot of influence is sort of not even conscious. You know, you're just drawing on it maybe without even knowing that you're drawing on it. And I think as an Irish writer, you're drawn particularly to Irish writers. I think Irish writers use language differently, and I think it's hard to sort of pinpoint what the difference is. I often wonder what it is, but there's something very. I find something very musical about Irish writers. You know, I think the language, the rhythm of their language is, to me, instantly kind of draws me in. So I think a lot of Irish writers influence me, but I think maybe the biggest influence on me, the earliest influence on me, was from a set of short stories that we studied in school. It was stories for our intermediate certificate. And in that anthology, you had, Brendan Behan, Mary Lavin, Bernard McLaverty, loads of amazing Irish short story writers. I think short stories are a great place for a writer to start. And I think, not even thinking about it, I wanted to kind of emulate that. I kind of learned what a story was from that. And I learned that it could be so simple, and that it could be about something so extremely ordinary, and that it all had to be about the emotion in it, you know, and it had to move you. So they were the kind of things that I learned from that. I remember being so deeply moved by lots of those stories in that little anthology, which I think is not on the school syllabus anymore, which I think is criminal, because they were just amazing writers. So I think that was a moment probably in my life when I was very, very influenced by language, you know, particularly by the kind of language that they used, this very, very rich language that Brendan Behan would use, and humour and emotion and everything thrown in there. And then apart from that, I think when I was young, I was very influenced by James Baldwin's writing. I don't know why, it was something about the energy in it. It was, and of course, all of these things are books you come upon accidentally. You know, you dig them out of a box of secondhand books, and that they just end up influencing your life so much. So James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain, I think was the first one that I read, and I loved that. It was so paced and so strong and so on fire, you know. And I know that he had a background, a kind of a Christian background, and grew up kind of in a preaching household in the States. And funnily enough, I always loved the Bible as a child. I loved the Old Testament stories. I liked the drama in them and the searching in them. And I think that's why I liked James Baldwin when I was quite young so much. And I still love James Baldwin. So lots of different writers, I think. William Faulkner I loved, but I loved Charles Dickens when I was a teenager. And I think so many different influences. Obviously, you know, a writer like John McGahern The Dark would have had a massive influence on me when I was young. So much of an influence that I couldn't read it a second time. You know, it had this stark kind of presence on the bookshelf. I almost had to kind of walk around it when I was passing it because it had such an impact on me. I thought it was an extraordinarily courageous book, and I read it so many times since then, of course, and every time I read it, I find a new level of emotional meaning in it, you know. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Anna. Now might be a good time for your second reading. If this really is like Mass. Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like Mass. Okay, is it the mic too low, maybe? Thank you. Is that better? Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, this is from a chapter that's called It's Too Early for Blackberries. And Jean, the narrator of the book, is 11. And at this point in time, her mother is in hospital and she's been taken for a drive by her uncle. I began to drift away with the rhythm of the car and the stale, sleepy air and tried to distract myself. I would not be out for long, I kept saying to myself. I would be home with baby John to finish the grass house soon. On and on we went, further and further away, steeper and steeper the climb, louder and louder the engine, past gigantic trees sticking up out of yellow, rocky hillsides. The bends began to make me feel sick. I want to show you this lovely little wooden church, Uncle Ronnie said to Auntie Gertie, and then he almost missed the turn and had to jam on the brakes. Ah, now, he said, it looks like Mass is about to start. Lovely, she said, we'll go in. Will you go in, love, he said. I want to take Jean to pick some blackberries. That was what we promised her. So she climbed out of the car and banged the door, and then she opened it again and said, as you well know, it's too early for blackberries. She slammed the door, pulled her hard, square black leather bag up onto her elbow, and joined the crowd heading into Mass. I watched her until her wide brown coat disappeared into the dark portico that was shaped like a giant keyhole. Reversing the car out the churchyard, Uncle Ronnie said, well now, I don't think it is too early. And he winked at me in the rearview mirror. Past the junction, past the small sweet shop with the cat outside indistinct in colour, past the walled ice cream sign tilting slightly in the breezy day, past the tall summer trees blowing light and darkness into the car, past the juggernaut that swept up like a speeding dragon, blowing smoke and grit and a great whoosh through Uncle Ronnie's partly opened window, past heather and tall sombre trees with twisted faces in their bark, until he said, climb into the front, come on, I'll slow down, come on. I sat on my hands, my head dipped low, because I did not wish to be looked at any longer by the centuries-old twisted faces in the giant trees, so cross with us for parading beneath them in the metal wagon with all of their dark, ancient knowledge. I sat on my hands and I bowed my head. Climb in, you'll see out better. Come on, I'm lonely up here all by myself. Mama said poor Auntie Gertie and Uncle Ronnie had no children. They would have liked some children, but Auntie Gertie couldn't ever since for some reason, some surgery, some problem. Don't tell me, I don't want to know. Come on, I'm lonely up here. Climb in before the next bend. Poor Ronnie has no children, and now you are making him lonely. You have to do what you're told to do when you're told to do it, or something bad might happen. Bad things happen when you do bad things. So hop in front there, or he will keep saying it. Come on, I'm lonely up here. Come on, I'm lonely up here. Come on, I'm lonely up here, all by myself up here, with no children to love me, and my wife fat and mean, with feet like yellow sponges spreading out over her fat shoes. Come on, don't delay. Hear my voice is getting impatient now. Do you hear that? Look how fast I am driving now. I might crash into the side of those rocks that already look like they will slide down and bash into the car. And if I keep gathering speed, you won't go home in one piece to baby John. And Mama has already gone, and what will baby John do then? Who knows what song is baby John's favourite song? You know, only you know. This is embarrassing. Get it over with, climb over. Mass will be over soon, and Auntie Gertie's sponge feet will walk towards the car, and she will climb in so heavily with such a thud and bring the bad odour she always carries. And now I am on the front passenger seat, and I sit on my hands and I dip my head low. Dip it low in shame, dip it low, keep it down, because if the centuries-old faces embedded in the bark of the sombre summer trees see this, they will be so sickened. They have never seen anything as disgusting after hundreds of years of people in their boots and on their donkeys and in their carts and jammed into their metal wagons, passing beneath them. You may pass through, but you disgust us. Why does he take your hand like that? Why does he pull it to him like that? Your arm is not long enough. He has to pull you over a little on the seat close to him. There we are. It is long enough now. Now he is driving much slower. Now he has stopped under the great sombre summer trees. Look down, don't look up. If they catch sight of your face, if you catch sight of their faces, It will be seized from your body and slapped into the tree bark for centuries and centuries. And when they come to look for you, they will whiz past in the car, and they will not even notice how your face was stolen on this very, very day by the giants of the trees. There is a smell now. I don't do anything. He only needs my hand. Here, cut it off. You can have it. I can smell something bad like a dirty toilet. And look how much he is relaxed now, and his head is leaning back on the seat, and he is sighing a bit like a happy man after a big gulp of whiskey on Christmas Eve. There, look, he has given you your hand back. You can have it. He doesn't need it. It is for you. Here is your hand, and here is your face on the tree bark, twisted with the others, twisted for centuries like theirs. But yours is new to the forest. You are the new girl in the forest. Some people say, this will pass, that will pass, all things pass. This is a flash in the pan, give it time. But I only have today. There is only today for me. Would you like an ice cream? Why do you fuss so much? You got your hand back, didn't you?
You mentioned, Anna, when you were talking about writers that influenced you, John McGahern. And this is the John McGahern Prize, and this isn't a setup. I didn't know that obviously Anna was interested in John McGahern, although it's kind of hard not to be, I think, if you're an Irish writer, as you said. So The Dark, as some of you will know, was McGahern's second novel, and it was banned by the Irish Censorship Board for reasons that they never explained. But really, it's to do with how frank it is about the sort of sexual awakening of a boy in rural Ireland in the middle part of the century, and it deals with sexual abuse. It's the first Irish novel to do that. And McGahern was banned and had to leave the country. He was fired from his job as a primary school teacher in a Catholic school, and he went into a self-imposed exile in London for a number of years. But he returned to Ireland and went on to become one of our great writers. By chance, I didn't know Anna was going to do this. Anna has a copy of Memoir, McGahern's last book, published in 2005 with her. And I hate to ask you to get up again, but I am going to ask you just for a very short reading that Anna has chosen from McGahern's Memoir. McGahern, these are dark themes, but ultimately there's light. There's light in McGahern's work, and ultimately there's light in this book also, Girl in the Making. In fact, I would say it's a story of redemption. It's a story of the power of literature and what that can do to reveal a happier world to us all. So this is just a very short reading from McGahern's Memoir.
We come from darkness into light and grow in the light until at death we return to that original darkness. Those early years of the light are also a partial darkness because we have no power or understanding and are helpless in the face of the world. This is one of the great miseries of childhood. Mercifully, it is quickly absorbed by the boundless faith and energy and the length of the endlessly changing day of the child. Not even the greatest catastrophe can last the whole length of that long day.
So McGahern was somebody who had come through this very difficult childhood and had found a kind of redemption himself through writing. And those of you who know his work will know that his final novel, That They May Face the Rising Sun, really deals with a theme which he found difficult to write about, but wrote about brilliantly in the end, which is happiness. And he finds a way to be happy, although he's suspicious of the thought of the very idea of happiness. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting kind of writing journey that he goes through. The setting of the book, 1970s, early 80s Dublin, how important is the temporal setting for trying to understand what's happening to Jean at this time?
Yeah, when I was writing it, I thought it was really vital because I thought that the story won't make any sense if I don't flag, the era that we're talking about all the time. So I did it by referring to things like, Housewife of the Year competition and music, songs, and that kind of thing. And also, there's a chapter in it called "A Dangerous Lunatic," and it actually is what the 19th century law that gave a husband the right to have his wife committed to a mental hospital was called the Dangerous Lunatic Law. That's actually what it was called, extraordinarily. But it was still operating in 1970s in Ireland. And so these things I felt I had to kind of mark. I had to signify the era. Otherwise, the story, people would be frustrated and they'd say, well, why doesn't that woman walk away from that guy? Why doesn't she, get a divorce from him? Why doesn't somebody pick up on the signs of the suffering of the children in the book? Why don't the children themselves, do something about it? Are they so oblivious to everything that they can't even see that they can go for help or something like that? So, and now, of course, you would have all of those things. You would have Childline, you would have all of those things. But Jean lives in an extraordinarily lonely world because she doesn't know anything about this and no one is talking about it. So she's in constant kind of danger. And no one notices that, or no one looks for an explanation as to why she is the way she is, or why she's, kind of a very withdrawn person. So flagging the era was really very important because the story I felt wouldn't make sense. But then, when I think about it, when I look at the statistics for the rise of domestic violence from Britain and Ireland as well, I'm going, wait, what has changed actually? Not very much perhaps. And so I'm kind of disappointed to say that, in a way, I think that what's in the book people would still relate to today, because still there is a huge amount of, domestic abuse and domestic violence, and there's still a great deal of misogyny and violence against girls and women. So that's a very disappointing part of it. But nonetheless, the book had to be set in the 70s for the reasons of the strange things that happen, like the husband sells the house without consulting his wife at all, which these days you'd probably get two names on the house deeds and this kind of thing. So I felt it was really important to do that, and I did it by just little references and by songs. I thought songs were important actually in the book.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how you actually write? Are you very disciplined? Do you get up early in the morning? Are you a nighttime writer? Is it a permanent sort of job? Do you have another job and just writing is on the run? How does that happen?
Well, I have another job, full-time job, so it's really about stealing time. I literally have to steal the time. And it depends on what stage I'm at with writing. If a story is kind of in the moment of being created, and then that's a really busy time mentally, if you know what I mean, and emotionally it's very busy, it's very demanding. And you almost feel like the characters are like, even when you're trying to sleep, they're kind of tapping you on the shoulder, and I often get out of bed at like 4 a.m. and think, oh, I have to write this now because it'll be gone in the morning, because there's something strange about that moment of it. So there's an urgency, I guess, with that, and there's a you kind of visualize something and you hear something and then you have to write it down. But when it comes to the later part of the work, say, tidying it up, editing it, then I probably work. If it's really hard work, I probably work very well early in the morning, so that by 11 in the morning, that's done. But when you're at the creative stage of writing a character, it's much more. It really does kind of take possession of you in a different way, and you can't make plans about when you're going to do it. You just have to do it when it's kind of happening, when you're hearing it, sort of in your head.
This is your first published novel, but I know you've worked on other manuscripts in the past. Might some of those be put forward as a possible next novel? Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
I have another novel which is now with my agent. So I'm hoping, I have an agent now. I didn't have an agent the first time, so I would advise you get an agent. If you get interest from a publisher on the QT, go and tell an agent, I have an interest. That's the moment to come in before you've got this contract in front of you. But I do have a second novel that is in a good state. I've edited and cleaned it up, so that's with my agent now. So hopefully she'll find a publisher for it.
I imagine there are some budding writers here, and you think, you know, you were very green starting out. You didn't know what you were like. Let's see what happens, and your daughter encourages you and so on, and it mightn't have happened had she not. Give us a little bit of advice about starting out. What should we not do?
Well, I think most importantly, I would say write for yourself. That's the most important thing. Write about the things that really trouble you and bother you and have bothered you for decades. Write to yourself almost. That's the most important thing. And bear in mind, I think the worst thing to do when you're writing is to imagine somebody reading it and to think, try to please them, because you won't please them. You know, you can't. You don't know what people want to read. So I think you have to just write for yourself. This is a story, this is a world you want to put onto a page. And ideally, when you finished it, then you should read it and you should be very moved by it. And if you're not moved by it, then you're probably in trouble because nobody else is going to be moved by it. And I think that's what literature does. It moves us. Art moves us. That's all it really has to do, to move us to ourselves or to move us out towards others. But I think that's what it has to do. And so I think really write for yourself. Be really disciplined about that. Don't drift into thinking about what if this isn't good enough, or somebody might say this about this, or forget about all of that and just do your work, enjoy it, because it's the best part. You know, it really is a very enriching experience, as you know, if you're writing. And then when you're happy, you know, I mean, show it to somebody you really trust, who's very honest with you maybe, and then see, do you want to publish it? And then if you do want to publish it, I don't know how you do that. I mean, lots of writers try to get an agent first. It's quite hard to get an agent. I think you have to assume that when you send stuff out, that most of the time the thing is not read. I think you can take that as given. It's not read, so when you get a rejection, it's probably just a standard rejection that you're getting, and someone just didn't even open it because they're busy that day, or they're short of editors, or they're short of copy editors, or something very mundane like that, and it isn't about your book at all. So keep, you know, sending it out, I think, and as soon as you get an interest from anybody, or a good review, say you get a good review from someone, you know, I was very lucky. Ian Sanson, who's a terrific writer, read my book, and so I had his little review, and my daughter had that, and she sent it out with that review, so that got people's attention. In the subject, she put something like, Ian Sanson loved this book, right? So that was a door opening immediately because he had liked it. So if you know someone who can do that for you, I think that is a great way to start. And then talk to the publishers, and then when they've made you some shoddy offer, get yourself an agent.
Thanks, Anna. I might ask you now for your next reading.
Okay. It definitely is like Mass. This is from, Gina is 15 at this point, and I find this part of the story quite important because I feel it's the part of the story where Jean begins to realize that she's a person separate from her family, and that she no longer has to be there all the time to protect them, particularly to protect her mother. And it's called A Diary for the Sea. Miss Emily Barrington, my fourth form English teacher, assigned us a summer project. Make a record of your feelings, she urged passionately, assuring us that she intended to do the same. July 2nd, loneliness. I ought to be glad to lie in the grass at the top of the garden, out of sight behind the copper beech bush, not to be at school in that deeper pool of loneliness, where I am all the time torn between humiliation and flight. I am strange there, but I am strange here too, in the grass alone, listening. I am somewhat compensated, because against my ears tiny creatures hum. This morning, a black and red ladybird scaled a blade of grass, gripped it expertly, only twice falling, uninjured, pedaling herself upright, and setting out again. If I was not so gigantic and my fingers not so clumsy in that world, I might have assisted her, though I think it is her privilege to do her own work. And it is a kind of privilege to lie here and watch her. When I gaze up into the sky and follow the jet streaks, white and fluffy against the blue, I know that somewhere else life is going on. I don't mind. It is peaceful here. but the creatures are not with me at night when the loneliness is most profound. It is bizarre, but sometimes at night, unless John has come to me seeking comfort from a bad dream, I begin to long for home. It is the most absurd of longings, because I am home, Mama is here, and the others, but still I ache for home. It feels like a great emptiness, so vast that there is a danger that I will cave in on myself, because I am hollow. Perhaps it is that I long to go back to our old house. Vaguely, I know that there is someone there whom I miss, but I cannot work out who it is. I try to get a grip of myself. I say emphatically, repeatedly, in my head, in those cold hours when I wait for dawn, "You are home. This is it."
I wonder, we've spoken before about encouragement and the need perhaps for at least one person to tell you once that you're good or can do something. I wonder, would you talk a little bit about the impact of school on you and more generally of your English teacher at school?
Yeah, I wasn't a major fan of school at all. I didn't like school at all, but I did have this extraordinary English teacher, and I literally went to school just to see her. And if I didn't have English that day, I didn't go. She was a very impressive woman, you know. She was full of stories, and she knew Patrick Kavanagh. She had known Patrick Kavanagh, you know. She knew all these writers in the old Dublin, where you know, there was a great pub life. And you would see people like John McGahern out meeting other writers and talking. And she knew that group because her husband wasn't publishing, I think. But she knew them all, and she used to stand and stare out the window and talk about them, you know, and read from them. And she was really encouraging. She was just loved her literature. She loved her poetry, you know. She loved great poets like John Donne. And she was so encouraging to me. She encouraged me to write. She would give me a typed up list of books that I should try and read in the summer. And she just, when she read something that I wrote, she never criticized it, you know, she never marked it with editing ideas or anything like that. She would just explain how it moved her. She would always say, this moved me in such and such a way, or something like that. And that was very encouraging, because it was the only thing I liked in school. And I only liked the creative part of writing, really, you know. So she was an amazing influence. And when I left school, I really felt bereft, you know. I really missed her. And I had no one to read my writing. I had no one to talk to about writing, and no one to talk to about books. And I really missed her. She no longer is living, and I would love to have let her know that I did actually publish a book, because she said that I would, but I guess she never got to see that. So I think, you know, one person, as you say, one person in your life, whether it's in school or maybe it's a student sitting in front of you in a lecture, and someone tells you, "Oh, this is what you can do. You can do this," I think is really an amazing thing. It really enables the person to flourish, even in a very small way in the world, in a way in which they never expected, and it enables them to kind of unlock something inside them that they were almost afraid to maybe talk about or to act on. So, yeah.
I know that Anna does have one more reading, but I'm conscious of the clock, and I wondered if anyone in the audience had a question before we go any further with the event. There's a question here. There'll be a microphone, I think, coming to you, right in the middle here. Third row.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering, with you talking about having quite a wealth of what it sounds like unpublished material that you've written in the past before publishing this book. I've been at readings of Emma McBride and Kevin Barry in the last year or so, where they both talk about characters as though they're waiting for them to be picked back up, or that they inhabit them somehow. I was wondering whether you have the idea that you might revisit characters from unpublished works, or whether there's a finality there that they're done with almost.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, the book that I've just that my agent now has, I thought when I had it sort of literally under the bed that it was finished, you know. And then I realized that I'd held back on two of the characters. And I thought about that. Why did I hold back on those two characters? I didn't give them their fullness that they needed, and everybody else is complete. Everybody else feels full. And I realized then that I didn't complete them because I didn't want to go into their heads, because I thought I thought one was very kind of dark, and I did not want to know what he thought. And then the other one I thought was very morally weak, and I did not want to engage with her either. So I didn't give them their space. And I had to ask myself why I didn't do that. And I thought, well, it's because I was being cowardly, you know, I didn't want to face these things. And so when I did write those characters then, and I really got into their heads and tried to imagine why they had acted in some ways so badly towards others in the world, I began to really see their frailty and the human side of them that is in everybody, one way or another, even though we sometimes don't want to think that. It's much easier to say, no, you're just a bad person, and that's neat, you know, that's the neat way. And that's kind of what I had done with these characters. So when I went back to that book, thinking that's finished, that's done, you know, I found that it was, except for those two characters. And I had to go right back in and write them again. And it took like 40,000 words to sort those two out. So it was really very important that I do that, but I had been resisting. And it's funny how much you can be resisting, you know, and then you realize that that's usually for an emotional reason. That is usually because you're too scared to go there, because it's much easier to have the world, you know, compartmentalized into good, bad. So yeah, that has happened, especially with that book just now. And that was the bit that was missing in it. I just wasn't getting close to the people I didn't want to be close to. And of course, you have to get close to all your characters, whether you like them or you don't like them. You know, you're omniscient, you got to know them all, and you can't pick and choose whose world you're going to show. Everybody has to be in that world. So yeah.
Sounds like there's almost like a cathartic impulse then to kind of complete them.
Definitely, yeah. That's right. Thanks.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? There's one here. Yeah, there's your mic. Thank you.
Is the novel autobiographical?
No, it's not. It's not a memoir. But I would say that in writing it, I drew on an awful lot of my personality as a child. You know, I mean, definitely the character of Jean is based on me temperamentally and how I would have reacted to this kind of a setting. But no, it's not autobiographical. It does draw on my experience, but it's not autobiographical.
Thanks, Anna. I might ask you to for your final reading then for this evening. Thank you.
This is from towards the end of the novel, where Jean's life is improving and she's moved out of home and she's about to discover the possibility of a future for herself, and finds out that somebody thinks that she's capable of writing, and it's called The Mischief of the Lugworms. The taxi driver dropped my boxes of books at the bottom of the front steps. I dragged them upstairs to my new bedsit and shut the door, fastening the chain across it. Suddenly, faint and drained, without removing my coat and without putting a sheet on the bed, I fell upon it. Immediately, the odor of damp and must rose up and seeped through me. The mattress sagged, wet and cold against me. For endless days, a long silence fell. I stopped phoning the house because I had been so often disappointed by Tilly's report that Mama was sleeping. And Mama didn't call me, and no one came. I was vaguely aware that I ought to be waiting to hear if I would get my place at university. But I was not waiting, for I did not care. I began to fear that the melancholy that had taken Mama from us so many times had come to take me, for I became as still as she had become, and as silent. And every time I woke, in and out of what seemed a constant slumber, I determined each time to fall asleep once more. The days stacked up against me, and the nights were filled with a stiffening grief that I could not account for no one had died. The strange bed, uncomfortable and chilling though it was, held me captive, and I was as helpless as though caught in a great iron claw. I did not fight, but instead permitted the claw its victory. The days passed like nights, and only when it was dark and silent did I make my way down to the sea. One evening, sometime in early August, just after darkness fell, and the great house of bedsits sat at last still and hushed around me, after a 3-night absence, I decided to go to the Strand. I turned out of the village with a vague sense that something was taking shape in my mind, something from which I had been shielding myself for some time, but which now would insist on being heard. Too weary to walk out to the water, I sat on the Strand wall, gazing across the sands, broken here and there by pools of shallow water that shimmered under the moonlight. From unseen places, birds of varied song curled across the distance. For a while, out towards the shelly banks, I watched 3 figures, bent and digging for fishing bait. I watched them thinking, what is it that they are feeling, that I am feeling? After some time, they walked back towards the road. I watched their car glide silently towards the city until it disappeared. I wondered what those bait diggers might say to one another on that journey, but I could imagine no conversation. And it occurred to me, loneliness is something more than a feeling on the inside of yourself. You can see it also on the outside of yourself, for no matter where you look, it reflects back to you. A thick cloud shifted in from somewhere far out at sea to block the moon's light, so that the shallow pools no longer shone and the darkness landed solid. I began to consider the position in which I found myself. I began to wonder what I might do. As I sat staring dumbly at the horizon, I made some calculations. The distance between where you stand at a point in Sandymount Strand to where the unreachable waves flatly glitter like a field of furrowed metal is the definition of infinity. And the sum of absences, felt in every muscle, bone, cavity, and scale of the skin, is the beginning of the end. There now, something of a victory over absence, if only in an equation. So the ending was imminent. It had not been my decision, but no part of me seemed ready to object. And with this realization came insight and a full comprehension of the destruction I had caused, of the trouble with truth. Truth did not matter. It was not, after all, the thing that keeps us whole. It was, as all along Mama could see, the thing that would break us apart. And there I sat. The sky darkened, lightened, darkened, lightened to exhibit at some incalculable distance a rectangular ship with no bottom, only barely connected to the water, like old ships off Sandymount, nearly motionless, trying to enter or exit the bay, run aground on a sandy bank perhaps. But no, watch closely. It was moving. It was I who was still. Boats never seem to move in Dublin Bay, but when you turn back to glance at them once more, they have always disappeared. That is just the way it is with this bay. It is the tides or the mischief of the lugworms, or it is because this is a disappearing place. Long past the midnight chimes of Star of the Sea, I gazed across that desert. What was I to do with this sense of an ending pushed upon me by the choking absences which had filled every vacant part of me? It would end without me, though it was to be my very own ending. Numbed by this new knowledge, I retreated to my bedsit. There in black sleep, the claw held me, merciless in its grip. For many days, each one nameless, as slowly, slowly I disappeared. I am so ashamed, Mama, so ashamed that I have given up. Nevertheless, yet quite mysteriously one evening, perhaps a week or so later, something lifted in me. I had determined to go to the Strand no more, vowed that I would turn my back on that disappearing place that had somehow flattened me. But then I felt again a longing for the sea. I opened my eyes, unbound myself from the fetal position, and lay on my back, contemplating rising from the claw, which had loosened its grip. My hand had been dangling to the floor, my fingertips just about brushing the cover of my leaving certificate poetry book. Soundings. And then I picked it up. I turned to those lines that had for so long perplexed me. Oh, the mind has mountains, cliffs of fall, frightful. I understood in that moment that what had happened at the Strand was that I had fallen, and if I had fallen, I could get up. In some self-yeast of spirit, I rose from that black sleep and in search of crashing waves and of a wider sea, I set out for Sea Point. By the time I was freewheeling down Sea Point Avenue, the evening sun was in its last half hour. I hid my bicycle behind the bathing shelter and headed past the Martello Tower to the ramp to the sea. The tide was out and the small beach teemed with life. Little parties of sandpipers and wagtails foraged for delicacies left behind by the tide. Out on a distant rock, a singular, long-billed, white-bellied cormorant stood confident on his stilts, gaping out across his fishing grounds. Half a dozen times I walked the length of the short beach. I knew it impossible, but I was certain that I could hear not just the water's lapping, not just the seabird's song, but the sounds of crabs no bigger than my fingernail, creeping and living, and the swishing of the tails of those shoals of minnows.
Thanks, Anna. I think one of the things that comes through from this book, and we saw it in that last reading there, where Jean is nourished by poetry she's learned in school, in this case, some poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins, which I remember I had to study as well for my final exam in secondary school, and anyone here who's done the Irish Leaving Cert will remember studying Hopkins. And you can't know, I think, when you're studying a book, and the same applies in university, of course, you can't know what effect that book might have on you a year from then, 10 years from then, 20 years from then. These lines that stay in your mind. And Jean Kennedy, I think, is this wonderful character that we see grow from the age of 3 to 18, that has a difficult life, but that is sustained in part by her engagement with art and with literature, and that becomes a crucial part of her life as the book comes to an end. I'm delighted that Anna has won this prize. I think this is a remarkable novel, and I feel certain that we will be hearing more of Anna, and rightly so, in the years to come. So please give her a warm round of applause.